The gymnasium lights hummed above the polished floor of Westfield High, bleaching every face in the room the same pale glare. Cameras were already rolling. The school board loved live streams, proof of transparency. Lena Carter stood near the podium with a folded scholarship letter clutched in her hand. She had earned it. Top grades, debate champion, a speech about community resilience that had traveled across the state. But tonight the room felt wrong. Whispers crawled across the bleachers. Isn't she from Millbrook? Yeah, that place by the old refinery. Figures. Millbrook was the kind of town people only mention with a smirk. A mostly black community pushed behind factories and rail lines, where the air sometimes smelled like burnt metal. Principal Howard adjusted the microphone. Tonight, he announced smoothly, we celebrate students who represent the future of this district. Lena stepped forward. Before she could speak, a boy in the front row, Brandon Whitaker, captain of the lacrosse team, laughed loudly enough for the microphones to catch it. Future, he said. The gym went quiet. He leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on Lena. Doesn't your town still have dirt roads? A few students snickered. The live stream chat began to explode. Lena felt heat climb her neck. Her fingers tightened around the scholarship letter. Then Brandon added one more sentence, casual as a shrug. People from Millbrook don't become history. They're the reason history repeats. The cameras kept rolling, and Lena slowly looked up at him, just as someone in the back of the gym shouted her name. The gym smelled faintly of floor polish and overheated wiring. Lena Carter stood beside the folding chairs reserved for scholarship recipients, smoothing the crease in her navy blazer. Relax, whispered her friend Maya beside her. You literally have the best grade in the school. Lena exhaled slowly. That's not what they're looking at. Across the gym, clusters of students leaned against the bleachers. A few glanced toward Lena and then away. Brandon Whitaker sat in the front row with his lacrosse teammates. Their white jackets looked bright under the gym lights. Maya followed Lena's gaze. Ignore him. Trying to. Principal Howard tapped the microphone. The feedback squealed through the speakers. Good evening, Westfield families, he said, smiling toward the live stream camera. Tonight we celebrate achievement. The large projector screen flickered on behind him. Names appeared. Scholarships. Awards. Photos. Parents clapped politely. Lena felt the folded letter in her pocket press against her palm. Maya nudged her. Next one's yours. Principal Howard glanced at the tablet in his hand. And now, he said, the Carter Community Leadership Scholarship. Lena walked toward the stage. Each step echoed louder than it should have. Her mother sat halfway up the bleachers in her nurse's scrubs, still wearing the hospital badge clipped to her pocket. Denise Carter smiled proudly. Principal Howard gestured for Lena to stand beside him. This award recognizes a student whose dedication to community service represents the values our district strives for. He turned slightly toward her. Lena Carter. Applause scattered across the gym. Lena stepped closer to the microphone. Thank you, she began. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. I grew up in a town called Millbrook. A laugh cut across the gym. Sharp, loud. Brandon Whitaker leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. Of course you did, he muttered. Several boys near him chuckled. The microphone picked up everything. Principal Howard cleared his throat. Let's remain respectful. But Brandon raised his voice just enough. Respectful, he said. I'm just surprised. The gym quieted. Lena stared straight ahead. Brandon tilted his head. Doesn't Millbrook still have dirt roads? A few students laughed nervously. Someone whispered, Dude, stop. But Brandon shrugged. I'm serious. He looked directly at Lena. People from Millbrook don't become history. He paused. They're the reason history repeats. The words hung in the air. Maya stood up halfway from her seat. That's messed up, she said. Principal Howard stepped toward the microphone again. Brandon, that's enough. But the damage was already spreading. Students lifted their phones. The live stream comments began racing across the screen behind the stage. Lena felt her pulse hammering in her ears. She gripped the podium. Principal Howard leaned toward her quietly. You can finish your speech. Lena didn't look at him. Instead, she looked directly at Brandon. You think you know Millbrook? She asked. The gym fell completely silent. Brandon smirked. I know what everyone else knows. And what's that? That it's a place people leave. A few murmurs rippled through the room. Lena nodded slowly. My mother didn't leave, she said. Brandon shrugged. Maybe she should have. Gasps echoed from the bleachers. Denise Carter stood up. Principal Howard rushed forward. Okay, we're moving on. No, Lena said. Her voice was calm now. Too calm. You wanted to talk about history. Brandon crossed his arms. Go ahead. Lena looked out across the gym, at the students, at the cameras, at the live stream screen flickering behind the stage. You're right, she said quietly. Millbrook is part of history. Brandon rolled his eyes. But the part you forgot, Lena continued, is who wrote it. The room stayed frozen. Phones continued recording. And somewhere in the back of the gym, someone shouted her name again. Morning sunlight crept through the kitchen window of the Carter house, sliding across the worn wooden table where Lena sat scrolling through her phone. The video had passed 100,000 views overnight. Her stomach tightened. Maya had texted 3 times. Maya, they're sharing it everywhere. Maya, even the city news page posted it. Maya, are you okay? Lena locked the phone and pushed it across the table. Denise Carter poured coffee into a chipped mug and sat down across from her daughter. You haven't touched your breakfast. I'm not hungry. Denise studied her quietly. You want to talk about it? Lena shrugged. What's there to say? Denise folded her hands. Start with how you feel. Lena leaned back in her chair. I feel like everyone's watching. They are. That's not helping. Denise gave a small smile. Truth rarely stays quiet. Outside the kitchen window, the street was waking up. Mr. Jenkins across the road was already watering the small vegetable garden he had built in the empty lot beside his house. A delivery truck rumbled past slowly. Lena followed it with her eyes. Do you ever wish we lived somewhere else? She asked suddenly. Denise raised an eyebrow. No, not even once? No. Why? Denise took a sip of coffee. Because this town raised me. Lena gestured toward the window. It also poisoned half the air. Denise didn't argue. Millbrook had once been a factory town. Steel, rubber, chemical processing. When the plants closed in the early 90s, the jobs disappeared, but the pollution stayed behind. You know what people say about this place? Lena continued. Denise nodded. Yes. They think it's broken. Some parts are. They think nobody here cares. That part's wrong. Lena stared at the kitchen table. A knock sounded on the door. Denise stood and opened it. Mr. Jenkins stepped inside, holding his phone. Morning, Lena, he said gently. Morning. He turned the phone so she could see the screen. The video from the gym played again. Brandon's voice echoed from the speaker. Doesn't Millbrook still have dirt roads? Mr. Jenkins shook his head slowly. That boy doesn't know a thing. Lena sighed. Now everyone thinks he's right. Mr. Jenkins laughed quietly. No, they don't. Yes, they do. No, he said firmly. They're just loud. Denise leaned against the counter. People talk when they're uncomfortable. Or when they're ignorant, Mr. Jenkins added. Lena rubbed her temples. I wish it would just disappear. It won't, Denise said. Mr. Jenkins nodded toward the phone. Reporter called me this morning. Lena looked up. What reporter? Local paper. About the video? About Millbrook. Denise frowned. What did you say? Mr. Jenkins smiled. I told him the truth. A car pulled up outside. A woman stepped out carrying a camera bag. Mr. Jenkins glanced through the window. Looks like he sent someone. Lena stood. Already? Denise opened the front door. The woman approached cautiously. Hi, she said. I'm Rachel Kim from the Westfield Chronicle. Her voice was calm, but curious. I'm working on a story about the video from the scholarship ceremony. Lena crossed her arms. So now everyone wants to visit Millbrook. Rachel nodded slightly. Yes, and I want to know if what people are saying about this town is true. Mr. Jenkins chuckled. Depends who you ask. Rachel pulled out a notebook. What do you think of the comments made about Millbrook? Mr. Jenkins answered first. I think people who've never been here love to describe it. Rachel turned to Lena. And you? Lena hesitated. I think they see factories and assume that's the whole story. Rachel scribbled notes. What's the real story? Lena looked out the window. Kids were walking toward the bus stop. Mrs. Alvarez was opening the small grocery store on the corner. Mr. Jenkins' tomatoes glowed red in the sunlight. The real story, Lena said slowly, is that people here stayed. Rachel glanced up. Stayed. When everyone else left. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. Do you mind if I ask about the ceremony? Lena's jaw tightened. What about it? Rachel flipped to another page. Some students say Brandon Whitaker was joking. Mr. Jenkins scoffed loudly. Joking doesn't sound like that. Rachel looked at Lena again. Do you think the school handled it properly? Lena thought about Principal Howard's nervous smile, about the way the microphone had stayed on, about Brandon's smirk. No, she said quietly. Rachel wrote quickly, Are you planning to respond publicly? Lena shook her head. I already did. At the ceremony? Yes. Rachel studied her. You're speaking at the Regional Youth Leadership Conference next week, right? Lena blinked. How did you know that? It's in your scholarship profile. Rachel closed her notebook. People are going to expect you to talk about this. Lena looked down at her hands. The speech she had planned suddenly felt small. Mr. Jenkins placed a hand on her shoulder. Tell them the truth, he said. What if the truth is enough? Denise answered from the doorway. It always is. Across town, Brandon Whitaker sat in a coffee shop, scrolling through the same viral video. His friend Tyler laughed. Dude, people are losing their minds over this. Brandon smirked. Overreaction. Tyler nodded. It's just a town. Brandon leaned back in his chair. Exactly. Meanwhile, in Millbrook, Lena Carter stared at the empty page of her speech notebook. For the first time since the ceremony, she wasn't sure what she was supposed to say next. The hallway outside Principal Howard's office felt colder than the rest of the school. Lena sat in the stiff plastic chair across from the secretary's desk, her backpack resting against her legs. Students passed in the corridor, some whispering, some pretending not to look. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another message about the video. She didn't check it. The secretary glanced toward the closed office door. He'll call you in soon, she said softly. Lena nodded. Across the hallway, the door opened. Brandon Whitaker stepped out of the stairwell, with his friend Tyler trailing behind him. Tyler spotted Lena immediately. Well, he muttered, this should be interesting. Brandon walked toward the office without breaking stride. He stopped in front of Lena. You're really running with this thing, huh? Lena looked up slowly. I'm sitting in a chair. You know what I mean. Tyler leaned against the wall. Man, people online are acting like you committed a crime. Brandon shrugged. I said something everyone already knows. Lena stood. Everyone. Yeah. What exactly does everyone know? Brandon smirked. That Millbrook's not exactly. The office door opened. Principal Howard stepped into the hallway quickly. All right, he said. Let's keep this professional. He gestured toward the office. Both of you inside. Tyler straightened. I'll wait here. Principal Howard shook his head. No spectators. Tyler raised his hands. Relax. I'll grab coffee. He disappeared down the hall. Inside the office, the air smelled faintly of old paper and furniture polish. Principal Howard closed the door behind them. Sit. Lena took the chair on the left. Brandon dropped into the one on the right. Principal Howard remained standing for a moment, rubbing his temples. This situation, he began carefully, has gotten larger than expected. Brandon leaned back. You mean the internet losing its mind? Principal Howard shot him a look. This is serious, Brandon. Over a joke? Lena's eyes narrowed. Principal Howard sat behind his desk. The district has received several complaints, he continued. Parents, community members, even local media. Brandon rolled his eyes. So we need to resolve this. He folded his hands on the desk. Quickly, Lena waited. Principal Howard looked at her. Lena, you understand the position the school is in. What position is that? The public perception that something inappropriate occurred during a school event. Something inappropriate did occur. Principal Howard nodded slowly. Yes, but perception and reality often become complicated. Lena stared at him. What part is complicated? Brandon chuckled under his breath. Principal Howard ignored him. What I'm proposing, he said carefully, is a mutual statement. Lena frowned. Mutual? Yes. A statement acknowledging that tensions were high during the ceremony and that both parties regret how the exchange unfolded. Lena blinked. Both parties. Brandon leaned forward. That sounds fair. Lena turned toward him. You think that sounds fair? He shrugged. You said stuff too. I responded to what you said. Exactly. Principal Howard raised his hands. This isn't about assigning blame. It sounded exactly like that, Lena replied. The principal sighed. The goal is to calm the situation. By pretending it didn't happen? By showing maturity. Brandon smirked. See? Even he thinks people are overreacting. Lena turned back to Principal Howard. Why wasn't maturity important before the video went viral? The principal hesitated. That's not what this is about. It feels like it. Lena, you didn't stop him until people started recording. Principal Howard shifted in his chair. I addressed the comment. After he said it, Brandon crossed his arms. Because it wasn't a big deal. Lena looked at him. You told an entire gym full of people that my town represents failure. I said, history repeats there. Same thing. Brandon shrugged. I was stating facts. What facts? Look it up. Principal Howard leaned forward. Brandon? What? This isn't helping. Brandon gestured toward Lena. She's the one making this huge. Lena laughed softly. Do you hear yourself? Principal Howard spoke again. The district wants this resolved quietly. Lena shook her head. Quietly. Yes. Why? So the school can move forward. With what? With unity. Brandon nodded. Exactly. Lena stared at the principal. You're not asking him to apologize. That's not accurate. You're asking both of us to apologize. Principal Howard hesitated. Yes. For what I said after he insulted my town. For the exchange. Lena leaned back slowly. You're worried about the school's reputation. We're responsible for maintaining order. You're responsible for protecting students. We are. Then why does a solution sound like a press release? Silence filled the office. Brandon sighed loudly. Can we just sign whatever and be done? Principal Howard looked at Lena. If both of you agree to the statement, we can release it this afternoon. Lena stood. I'm not signing it. Principal Howard blinked. Lena, I didn't start that conversation. This would help calm the public. It would calm the school. That matters too. Not more than the truth. Brandon scoffed. Unbelievable. Principal Howard stood quickly. Think about this carefully. I have. The situation could escalate. It already has. Principal Howard softened his tone. This could follow you into college applications. Lena paused at the door. Then she turned back. If telling the truth hurts my applications, she said quietly, that's not a problem with me. Brandon laughed again. Principal Howard opened his mouth. But Lena had already walked out of the office. The door closed behind her. And for the first time since the video spread, the school no longer controlled the story. The video refused to disappear. Every time Lena opened her phone, it was there again. Different angle, different caption, different argument unfolding beneath it. By the end of the week, the clip from the scholarship ceremony had been shared across half the state. News pages, community forums, even national commentators. Lena sat at the small kitchen table in Millbrook, staring at the screen. Another notification flashed. Westfield Chronicle opinion. When jokes reveal something deeper. She tapped it. A still image from the gym appeared at the top of the article. Brandon leaning back in his chair. Lena standing at the podium. The headline read, A high school incident forces a community to confront its bias. Denise Carter walked in from the hallway, tying her hair back. You're reading about it again. Lena didn't look up. They're everywhere. Denise set down a grocery bag. What are they saying now? That it's not just about a joke. Denise nodded slowly. Because it isn't. Lena locked the phone and pushed it away. But it also doesn't feel like my story anymore. Outside, a car passed slowly down the street. Denise unpacked vegetables onto the counter. That happens when something bigger gets exposed. Lena sighed. I didn't want to expose anything. Truth doesn't wait for permission. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from someone she didn't recognize. She hesitated before opening it. Unknown. Hey, I saw the video. Something similar happened to me 2 years ago. Different school. Same words. Lena frowned. Another message arrived. Unknown. They told me to keep quiet so the school wouldn't look bad. Then another and another. Lena scrolled. Messages poured in from strangers. Different cities. Different schools. Same story. She looked up. Mom. Denise walked over. What is it? People are sending me messages. Support? Some. And the rest? They're telling me what happened to them. Denise read one of the messages. Her expression hardened. This isn't just about one kid in a gym. Lena leaned back. That's what everyone keeps saying. A car door slammed outside. Mr. Jenkins appeared at the window. He waved toward the front door. Denise opened it. Mr. Jenkins stepped inside, holding a folded newspaper. Morning again, he said. You're becoming a regular guest. Denise replied. Mr. Jenkins handed Lena the paper. Front page. She unfolded it. The headline stretched across the page. Video sparks debate on bias in Westfield schools. Below it was a photo of the gym. Lena stared at it quietly. Feels strange seeing your life in print, doesn't it? Mr. Jenkins said. Lena nodded. Across town, Brandon Whitaker sat in a leather chair inside his family's living room. The television played the same video. His father, Robert Whitaker, stood beside the window speaking into his phone. Yes, Robert said calmly. We're aware of the situation. Brandon rolled his eyes. It's ridiculous. Robert covered the receiver. Stop talking. He returned to the call. No, my son did not intend anything offensive. The internet is amplifying a misunderstanding. He paused. Yes, exactly. Brandon leaned toward the television. They're acting like I attacked someone. Robert finished the call and hung up. You need to stay quiet. Why? Because this isn't about what happened. Then what is it about? Robert gestured toward the television. Perception. Brandon scoffed. So now I'm the villain. You're the headline. And headlines attract attention. Brandon leaned back. So we changed the story. Robert nodded slowly. That's exactly what we're going to do. Back in Millbrook, Lena's phone rang. An unfamiliar number. She looked at Denise. Answer it, her mother said. Lena tapped the screen. Hello. A calm voice responded. Good afternoon. Is this Lena Carter? Yes. My name is Daniel Alvarez. I'm a civil rights attorney with the Midwest Justice Initiative. Lena sat up straight. I saw the video, he continued. So did everyone else. I'm calling because what happened may involve more than one student's comment. Lena glanced at Denise. What do you mean? Situations like this often reveal larger patterns. Patterns? Yes. School responses, disciplinary disparities, institutional behavior. Denise stepped closer to the phone. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that the incident might be part of a broader issue. Lena hesitated. I didn't call anyone. I know, Alvarez said, but the moment the video appeared, the conversation stopped being private. Lena looked at the newspaper again. What happens now? That depends, Alvarez replied. On what? On whether people want the story to disappear. He paused. Or finally be understood. Lena stared at the kitchen table. The pressure around her seemed to tighten. The video still played on phones, on televisions, across thousands of screens, and it showed no sign of fading. The auditorium at Westfield High had never been this full for a student forum. Folding chairs filled the aisles. Students leaned against the walls. Teachers stood near the exits pretending to supervise. A banner taped above the stage read, "Student Forum, Community and Respect." Lena stood backstage beside Maya. "You don't have to speak," Maya whispered. Lena adjusted the sleeves of her blazer. "I know, but everyone expects you to. That's the problem." From the stage, a student council representative tapped the microphone. "Okay, everyone, let's settle down." The room quieted gradually. "This forum was organized by students," the representative said. "We wanted a space to talk about what happened at the scholarship ceremony and what it means for our school." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some students clapped. Others crossed their arms. Near the back row, Brandon Whitaker sat with Tyler and two other athletes. Tyler leaned toward him. "This is going to be a circus." Brandon shrugged. "Let them talk." On stage, the representative continued. "We'll hear from several students tonight." He glanced toward the side of the stage. First speaker, Maya Patel. Maya stepped forward. Her voice trembled at first. "Last week, a moment in our school gym went viral." She paused. "Some people said it was just a joke." A few students nodded. "But jokes tell you something about the room you're in," Maya continued. "They tell you what people think is normal." A student in the middle row raised his hand. "Are we allowed to respond?" "Yes," the representative said. "But let speakers finish first." Maya took a breath. "I've known Lena for 3 years. She's one of the hardest working people in this school." A few students clapped. "She shouldn't have to defend where she comes from." Someone near the back shouted, "Nobody asked her to." Murmurs spread. The representative raised his hand. "Please, let's keep this respectful." Another student stood up. "Look, I'm not defending what Brandon said," he began, "but the internet blew it way out of proportion." Several heads nodded. This school has never had a problem like that before. From the side of the stage, Maya answered calmly. "Maybe that means people just didn't talk about it before." A girl in the second row spoke up. "My cousin goes here," she said, "and she said kids make comments like that all the time." More murmurs. Brandon leaned toward Tyler. "This is ridiculous." Tyler shifted in his chair. "Yeah, but people aren't laughing anymore." Brandon frowned. The representative stepped forward again. "Next speaker, Lena Carter." The room quieted instantly. Lena walked onto the stage. Every phone in the audience seemed to lift at the same moment. She stopped at the microphone. For a second, she said nothing. Then she looked across the room. "I didn't ask for this forum," she began. Her voice was steady. "But I understand why it's happening." A student near the aisle crossed his arms. "Because you made it happen." Lena nodded slightly. "You're right." The student looked surprised. "The video spread because I responded." Silence settled over the room. "But the reason people are still talking about it," Lena continued, "is because the words felt familiar." She glanced toward the back rows. "Not just here. Everywhere." Someone in the crowd asked, "What do you mean?" Lena gestured toward the audience. "This week I've received messages from students across the country." She paused. "Different schools. Same comments." A girl in the front row whispered, "Seriously?" "Yes." Lena leaned closer to the microphone. "They weren't asking me to fight their battles. They were asking me not to pretend it didn't happen." Brandon shifted in his chair. The room watched Lena carefully. "I come from Millbrook," she said. "You've all heard that name this week." Some students looked uncomfortable. "Some people hear it and imagine broken streets, closed factories, failure." She let the words settle. "But I see something else." "What?" someone asked. "People who stayed." The room grew quieter. Families who built community when the city forgot them. Neighbors who raised each other's kids. She glanced toward the cameras. "Stories matter." A student near the stage said softly, "Why?" "Because whoever tells the story decides what people believe." Lena straightened. "And for a long time, people outside Millbrook have been telling our story." A boy near Brandon muttered, "She's turning this into a speech." Tyler elbowed him. "Dude." Lena's voice sharpened slightly. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone." Her eyes moved briefly toward Brandon. "I'm here because silence protects the wrong things." The room held its breath. If someone tells you your hometown defines your limits, she said quietly, they're really telling you who they think belongs in the future. The auditorium remained completely still. And that, Lena finished, is why people are paying attention. For a moment, no one spoke. Then scattered applause began. One row, then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was clapping. Even some students who had arrived skeptical joined in. Near the back, Tyler looked at Brandon. You might want to stay off social media tonight. Brandon stared at the stage. For the first time since the video spread, the laughter that had once followed him was gone. And outside the auditorium doors, 2 local news cameras had just arrived. 3 weeks after the forum, the story stopped being about one video. It became about the district. Lena realized that the morning she opened her phone and saw the headline, Discipline Gaps Raise Questions in Westfield Schools. She read the article twice. Then a third time, numbers filled the page. Suspension rates, funding charts, transportation routes, patterns she had never seen laid out so clearly. Denise walked into the kitchen, tying the strings of her work apron. You're reading that report again. Lena nodded slowly. It's not just a video. No, Denise said. It never was. Lena tapped the screen. They're saying students from Millbrook schools get suspended almost twice as often. Denise leaned over her shoulder. That doesn't surprise me. But nobody ever talks about it. They are now. Another article appeared beneath it. Millbrook bus routes add 45 minutes to student commutes. Lena frowned. I thought everyone had long bus rides. Denise shook her head. Not in the northern neighborhoods. Lena leaned back in her chair. So people already knew. Some people. And they did nothing. Denise didn't answer. A knock sounded at the door. Mr. Jenkins stepped inside, carrying his tablet. You 2 see the evening news yet? Lena looked up. Not today. Mr. Jenkins placed the tablet on the table. A video began playing. A reporter stood outside the Westfield School District Office building. New data obtained by the Westfield Chronicle reveals funding differences between schools serving Millbrook and those serving northern suburbs. The screen changed the charts. Per student resources in Millbrook schools fall nearly 20% below district averages. Lena blinked. That's real. Mr. Jenkins nodded. They pulled public records. The reporter continued. Community advocates say these disparities reflect decades of neglect. Denise crossed her arms. Funny how people only notice when something goes viral. Lena stared at the screen. So Brandon's comment opened all of this. Mr. Jenkins shook his head. No. He tapped the screen. It exposed it. Across town, inside the district administration building, the school board meeting room buzzed with quiet tension. Superintendent Karen Douglas sat at the head of the table. This situation is escalating, she said firmly. Board member Alan Brooks adjusted his glasses. It's a media cycle. No, Douglas replied. It's an investigation. Another board member spoke. Reporters are requesting additional records. Brooks frowned. About what? Disciplinary policies, transportation, environmental reports. The room fell silent. Douglas folded her hands. We need a unified response. Brooks leaned forward. The narrative is getting away from us. Another board member sighed. It started with that student video. Douglas shook her head. It started long before that. Brooks rubbed his temples. Are we talking about policy changes? We're talking about accountability. Silence again. Meanwhile, Lena sat in her room staring at the speech notebook she had abandoned days earlier. The blank page no longer felt empty. It felt crowded. Messages continued arriving on her phone. Students, parents, former teachers. One message stood out. Former Millbrook teacher. I taught in that district for 20 years. Everything in the news is true. Lena typed slowly. Lena, why didn't anyone say anything before? The reply came quickly. Teacher. Some people did. Most people were ignored. Lena set the phone down. Her bedroom window looked out across Millbrook. The town stretched toward the old refinery stacks in the distance, a place outsiders call forgotten, a place reporters now described as underfunded. Her phone rang. Another unfamiliar number. Hello? The voice on the other end sounded familiar. Lena, this is Rachel Kim from the Chronicle. Hi. I wanted to let you know the district released a statement. Lena sat up. What did it say? They're announcing an internal review of school policies. Because of the video? Because of everything that followed it. Lena looked out the window again. I didn't mean for this to happen. Rachel's voice softened. That's usually how investigations begin. Lena hesitated. Do you think anything will actually change? Rachel paused. That depends on how long people keep asking questions. After the call ended, Lena opened the article Rachel mentioned. The district statement filled the screen. Westfield schools remain committed to equity and inclusion. Lena read the sentence twice. Then she closed the phone. For the first time since the ceremony, she understood something clearly. What had happened in that gym was never just about humiliation. It had been a crack in a much larger wall. And now, people were starting to see what had been hidden behind it. The school board meeting began quietly. Too quietly. Rows of folding chairs filled the Westfield District Auditorium. Parents, teachers, students, and reporters packed the room until people were standing along the walls. Camera lights glowed near the back. Lena sat beside her mother in the third row. Lena Carter's hands rested calmly in her lap, but Lena could feel the tension in her shoulders. You don't have to speak, Lena whispered. Denise kept her eyes on the stage. Yes, I do. At the front of the room, Superintendent Karen Douglas adjusted the microphone. This meeting of the Westfield School Board will come to order. Her voice echoed through the room. We understand the concerns raised by members of our community and welcome respectful dialogue. A man in the back row muttered, We've been asking for dialogue for years. Murmurs rippled across the crowd. Douglas continued carefully. Tonight we will hear public comments regarding recent events and district policies. The first speaker approached the podium, a middle-aged teacher. I've taught in this district for 15 years, she began, and I've watched resources disappear from Millbrook schools while other campuses build new facilities. Applause erupted from the audience. Board member Alan Brooks leaned toward the microphone. Please remember this is a structured meeting. The teacher didn't step away. Structure is exactly the problem. More applause. The next speaker was a parent from Millbrook. My son spends 2 hours a day on a bus, while schools 10 minutes from here have 3 routes. Another wave of clapping. Brooks scribbled notes nervously. Speaker after speaker approached the podium. A former student, a local pastor, a community organizer. Each one described the same pattern. Neglect, dismissal, silence. Lena watched the board members shift uncomfortably in their seats. After nearly an hour, the moderator called another name. Lena Carter. Lena felt her mother stand beside her. You don't have to do this alone, Lena said quietly. Denise squeezed her hand. I'm not alone. She walked toward the podium slowly. The room settled into silence. Denise adjusted the microphone. My name is Lena Carter, she said. Her voice carried clearly. I've lived in Millbrook my entire life. She paused. And I raised my daughter there. A few people nodded. I work 12-hour shifts at the county hospital. Denise continued. I leave before sunrise and come home after dark. Her eyes moved across the room. But every day I believe something simple, that if my daughter worked hard, the doors in this district would open. She looked toward the school board. Instead, I watched her stand in the gym while someone laughed at where she came from. The room grew very still. And when that moment happened, Denise said, the room didn't react. She leaned closer to the microphone. The silence was louder than the comment. A low murmur spread through the audience. Denise straightened. Millbrook is not perfect. No town is. But the people there built something you can't measure with funding charts. What's that? Someone called from the back. Community. Denise answered. Applause rolled through the auditorium. Denise stepped away from the podium. The moderator glanced down at the list again. Our final speaker for the evening is... He hesitated. Brandon Whitaker. The room reacted immediately. Some groans. Some whispers. Brandon walked toward the podium wearing a dark blazer. His father, Robert Whitaker, Watch from the back row. Brandon cleared his throat. I think this situation has gotten way out of hand. A few students in the audience crossed their arms. What happened in the gym was a joke, Brandon continued. And now everyone's acting like it proves the entire district is broken. Someone shouted, maybe it does. Brandon ignored it. I didn't insult anyone personally. Lena felt the room tighten. I made a comment about a town, Brandon said, and suddenly I'm responsible for decades of policy. A reporter lifted her camera. Brandon gestured toward the audience. People are using this to push agendas. Boos spread across the room. He raised his voice. Millbrook has problems. Everyone knows that. A woman near the aisle stood up. So does every other town. Brandon frowned. But pretending it won't fix anything. A student in the crowd shouted, you weren't trying to fix anything. Applause erupted. Brandon's expression hardened. I was stating facts. What facts? Someone yelled. That the town struggles. Another voice cut through the noise. Struggles because the district ignored it. The room erupted again. Brandon gripped the podium. People are twisting what I said. The moderator stepped forward. That's enough. But the damage was already done. Reporters were typing quickly. Students whispered. Parents shook their heads. Near the front row, Tyler leaned toward another athlete. Man, this isn't going well. Brandon stepped away from the podium abruptly. The moderator raised the microphone. This meeting is now adjourned. But the crowd kept talking. Voices rose across the auditorium. Lena looked toward the back of the room where Brandon stood with his father. The smirk that had once followed him through the halls was gone. For the first time since the night in the gym, the laughter had turned into something else. And Brandon Whitaker had no control over it anymore. The conference hall in Columbus was larger than Lena expected. Rows of chairs stretched across the ballroom, filled with students from dozens of schools across the state. Banners hung from the ceiling, announcing the Regional Youth Leadership Conference. Lena stood behind the stage curtain, holding her speech notebook. The pages were mostly empty. Maya's voice echoed in her memory. Just tell the truth. Denise sat in the audience near the front row, her hospital badge still clipped to her jacket. She caught Lena's eye and nodded. A volunteer approached. You're on in 2 minutes. Lena exhaled slowly. Okay. The announcer stepped onto the stage. Our final keynote speaker today has been part of a conversation that reached far beyond her school community. A murmur moved through the room. Please welcome Lena Carter from Westfield High. Applause rolled across the hall. Lena stepped into the light. The stage felt warmer than the auditorium. Hundreds of faces looked toward her. Phones were already lifted. A few reporters stood near the back. Lena reached the podium. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she began. A few weeks ago, she said calmly, my hometown became a headline. The room grew quiet. Some of you probably saw the video. Several students nodded. In the clip, someone laughed at the place where I grew up. She paused. For a while, that moment felt like the whole story. She rested her hands on the podium. But headlines only show a few seconds. A student in the front row leaned forward. My town is called Millbrook, Lena continued. It's the kind of place people describe without visiting. She glanced around the room. They say things like small, struggling, forgotten. A few students exchanged glances. But that's not what I see. What do you see? Someone asked quietly. Lena smiled slightly. I see my neighbor Mr. Jenkins growing tomatoes in an empty lot because he believes every street deserves something alive. Soft laughter spread through the room. I see Mrs. Alvarez opening her grocery store before sunrise so parents working night shifts can still buy breakfast for their kids. Heads nodded. And I see my mother, Lena said, her voice softening, leaving the house before dawn to work 12-hour shifts at the hospital. Denise lowered her eyes for a moment. People call Millbrook a broken place, Lena continued. But broken places don't raise children who believe they can change the world. Applause rippled through the audience. Lena waited for it to fade. When the video spread online, something unexpected happened. What? A student asked. My phone filled with messages. From people who said they recognized the moment. She looked across the hall. Different cities, different schools. Same feeling. A girl in the third row whispered to her friend. That happened at our school, too. Lena nodded slightly. That's when I realized something important. What's that? Another student asked. That humiliation spreads fast. But so does truth. The room fell silent again. For years, people outside Millbrook have told our story. She paused. They described our factories closing, our streets aging, our community shrinking. She leaned forward slightly, but they never talked about what stayed. The audience listened closely. They never talked about the families who refused to leave, the teachers who kept classrooms running when budgets disappeared, the kids who studied twice as hard because everyone expected them to fail. More applause. Lena raised her hand gently, and the room quieted again. Every town has a story, she said, but the question is always the same. Who gets to tell it? Silence held the room. If someone laughs at where you come from, Lena continued, they're really trying to decide where you're allowed to go. A few students nodded slowly. But stories don't belong to the loudest voices. They belong to the people who live them. A reporter in the back lifted her camera. Lena closed her notebook. I didn't come here today to talk about a comment in a gym. She looked out across the hall. I came here to talk about dignity. And about truth. The room remained still. My town taught me something simple. What's that? Someone called. That people are more than the places others imagine them to be. Applause began softly, then grew louder. Soon the entire hall was standing. The sound filled the room. Students clapped. Teachers clapped. Even the reporters lowered their cameras for a moment. Lena stepped back from the podium. Across the country, clips of the speech were already appearing online. Within hours, the video would spread further than the original humiliation ever had. But this time, the story being shared belonged to Lena. By the time spring arrived, the story had changed again. It was no longer just about a video, or a speech, or a school gym filled with laughter that turned into silence. It was about consequences. Lena sat at the kitchen table in Millbrook, flipping through a college acceptance packet. The envelope read Ohio State University. Denise leaned against the counter, arms folded. So, she said gently, what do you think? Lena looked up. I think it feels strange. Strange how? Like everything changed in a few months. Denise nodded. That's how change works. Lena glanced at the television in the living room. A local news segment was playing. The anchor spoke clearly. Following months of public scrutiny, the Westfield School District has approved several policy reforms, including new oversight on disciplinary procedures and transportation funding for Millbrook schools. Charts appeared on the screen. New bus routes, budget adjustments, equity review committees. Denise turned up the volume. The reporter continued. District officials say the changes were prompted by a community investigation that began after a widely shared student video. Lena muted the television. Feels weird hearing it described like that. Mr. Jenkins knocked on the open front door before stepping inside. Morning, Carter family. Morning, Denise said. He pointed toward the muted television. Looks like they're finally moving buses where they should have been years ago. Lena smiled faintly. Better late than never. Mr. Jenkins shrugged. True. He glanced at the acceptance packet. So that's the big envelope? Lena nodded. Ohio State. Mr. Jenkins grinned. Well, look at that. Denise poured coffee. You helped earn that. Mr. Jenkins waved a hand. She earned it herself. Lena laughed quietly. Across town, the halls of Westfield High felt different. Students still talk about the video, but not in the same way. Brandon Whitaker walked past the lockers without the usual crowd around him. Tyler stood beside the drinking fountain. You going to practice? Brandon shook his head. Coach suspended me for the rest of the season. Tyler winced. Seriously? District decision. He closed his locker harder than necessary. Tyler lowered his voice. My dad says colleges are asking questions now. Brandon leaned against the lockers. All over one comment. Tyler didn't answer. Students walked past him quietly. Some glanced at Brandon. Most didn't. The laughter that once followed him through the hallway had disappeared months ago. Back in Millbrook, Lena walked toward the community center at the end of Maple Street. The building looked modest on the outside, brick walls, wide windows, a faded sign above the door. Inside, children were finishing their after-school tutoring session. Mrs. Alvarez waved from the front desk. "Look who's visiting." Lena smiled, "Just stopping by." Mr. Jenkins sat near the window helping two kids with math worksheets. "You better not forget us when you become famous," he joked. "I'm not famous. Tell that to the reporters who keep driving through town." Lena laughed softly. The kids at the table looked up. "Are you the girl from the video?" one asked. Lena hesitated. "Yes." The boy tilted his head. "My mom said you stood up for Millbrook." Lena sat down beside them. "I told the truth about it." "That's the same thing," the boy said. Mr. Jenkins chuckled. "Smart kid." Outside the center's windows, the evening sun stretched across the streets of Millbrook. The old refinery stacks still stood in the distance. The grocery store lights flickered on. Parents walked home from work. The town looked the same as it always had, but something about it felt different. Later that evening, Lena stood outside the building alone. Denise joined her on the sidewalk. "You're quiet." "Just thinking." "About college?" "About everything." Denise looked down the street. "You change more than you realize." Lena shook her head. "I didn't change anything." "You told a story people tried to ignore. That's not the same as fixing it." "No," Denise said gently, "but it's where fixing begins." Lena looked back at the community center. Children's laughter drifted through the open door. The same streets that outsiders once described as forgotten now appeared in articles, reports, and speeches across the country. For the first time, the story of Millbrook wasn't being told by strangers. It belonged to the people who lived there. Lena exhaled slowly. Justice, she realized, rarely felt triumphant. It felt complicated, uneven, incomplete. But the truth had traveled further than the insult that started everything. And now, no one could pretend they hadn't heard it.